Test running at 3600 here at the moment, second day of testing, and it's all going well. But while I was doing this video, I thought it'd be good to talk about this TBI. Now this isn't the TBI on this engine, but it's the same principles, same setup. This is a larger TBI typically used on an 0360. But I'm just using it for demonstration purposes because all our TBIs are set up the same way. And I want to focus on this particular port here, which is a return line, and how beneficial it is. So on this side here, the AN6 fitting, this is the fuel inlet in. So fuel pressure comes in here, or gravity feed if you're using a gravity feed system. These units will run okay on gravity feed. Yeah, so your fuel potential comes in here, either from your pumps or your gravity fed tanks. Typically a fuel pump would be used, either the engine driven pump. So that's fuel in. On the other side, this is supplied with a BSB plug in here, or an NPT plug, I should say. And that plug is kept in place when you want to run a one-way system, fuel system with no return line. But if you add a fitting to here, you can run a return line. And it's really a big advantage of running the return line is if you ever get vapor lock or fuel boiling, the bubbles can bleed off. So inside here, that fuel fitting can switch, and you can swap them around because there's just a chamber in there, and that's unmetered fuel. Then the fuel goes up to the metering regulator and gets metered. So if you keep the fuel circulating, fuel pressure coming in here and then coming out here with a restricted orifice, it's a real advantage because you can keep, as I said, the fuel circulating, and you'll have virtually no chance of any vapor lock. When you run a closed system and you've got this blanked off and fuel coming in here, it works just as well, but you are susceptible to vapor lock if things get hot, really hot. Particularly if you're running on MoGas, which is more susceptible to vapor lock than avgas. But even avgas will vapor lock, it just takes longer. But we found that running this return line, very beneficial. So this engine here, this test booth here, gets stinking hot. Like, that is a closed room. It's got a fan up there, but even so, it still gets very hot in there. And what we found through lots and lots and literally hundreds of hours of running engines is we found that if we ran a closed loop system with this blanked off, on our radials, what would happen is eventually on unleaded fuel it got so hot that it would have trouble idling. It wasn't so bad at high power settings or full power because the fuel flow is quite high, but when it gets down to idle, you can get vapor lock and have erratic idle to the point where it won't idle and it'll quit. And in fact that has happened in the field where people have said they've been flying the plane and it's fine when they're flying, but when they come into land, quite often it'll either quit on final or quit when they're rolling out because it's so hot and the engine's idling. And one of our good customers, Brian Kelly, did some experiments, and Allison of course Havix also experimented with return lines, and they have the same option back in their day. But one of our good customers, Brian Kelly, fitted the return line, and he said it was a game changer. All of his problems at idle and on a hot day were gone. And so this test booth here is probably the best test case. So we decided to fit a return line, and just follow me. So the fuel tank is here. Right, we just run this 20 litre tank, and that nylon line there, that's the return line, and it's going into the top of the tank there, you see. And it's probably just coming in like about 2 inches, just pushed in there. And that's going to that port that I just showed you. And you see that fuel there, it's solid. So that's what you want. If you've got bubbles in that line, there's something wrong with your fuel system. And I often tell people who are having troubles with their installation to put a translucent line like this on their setup and look for bubbles. Now right now this engine is running and there's no bubbles in there at all, not one. That should be a solid line. And then that way you know your fuel systems and your fuel lines are tight, no air leaks, none of those sorts of things. If you're seeing bubbles in this line, that is a bad sign, right? Now on aircraft that I build or install, I always run a return line. In fact, just like this. This is a nylon line made of nylon, 3/16, and it's ideal. And that's running all the way down to the test stand, into the engine bay and into that engine. And when the engine starts to run out of fuel, you'll often see the bubbles coming in here, and you can hear the engine starting to run really crap because it's getting lean because all these bubbles. So if you're testing a TBI, you can run a return line like this, even to a remote tank outside the aircraft for testing. And then ultimately, if it fixes any of your issues, or if you see air in here, you know you've got a problem. Your fuel system needs to be sorted out. But as you can see there, that is a solid line of fuel. That's flowing, liberally flowing right now. So anyway, that's the return line. And it fits right there. So as I said, fuel would be coming in here and then circulating all the way up to that nylon line, which could be on your aircraft, a header tank, or back to the top of the fuel tank. That's a TBI return line. Personally, I'd highly recommend installing one. It just makes things a lot safer. And it took this test stand from being, you know, a little bit unreliable and, you know, having problems with engines that were hot idling, to look at it now. This engine's been running for hours. It's quite hot, and look at it idling. No problem at all, and solid line of fuel because we've fitted the return line. As soon as we fitted the return line, let's see if I can get that to focus. As soon as we installed the return line on this test booth, all of our idling problems disappeared instantly. So Brian Kelly of Florida, he was right. So yeah, we can run any crappy grade fuel we like now, and it will never vapor lock because of that return line. Anyway, that's for. I just thought I'd mention that. And yep. So if you run a return line, just a translucent line that you can study, look for bubbles. If there are no bubbles, great. You know, you might want to consider installing the return line permanently. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye bye.